and welcome everyone. We appreciate your patience as we're just a couple of minutes behind today. So appreciate you all being here. And if you have the ability to turn on your cameras, we would love to see your faces. And we are excited for today's presenter, Danielle Antelope. And she's back now. She just stepped away. So, and Danielle, I will just go ahead and turn it over to you to get started with your introduction and presentation. Thanks everyone for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mandy and Emma. I'm so happy to be here with you all. I'm going to jump right into the slides, and that'll start with the introduction. Please give me some grace as I have a 4-month-old on my lap and my 8-year-old in the back. So if I need to stop for a sec, they are why. So let me share my screen. Okay, and then I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions as well, because I definitely don't cover everything, and there might be something that you would like to know before the end of today's meeting. And then also just a little shout out to our interns that have been here at Fast Blackfeet. So I know they were the one we had last week, Millie, and then we have one this week as well. So we're super happy to have them at Fast. All right. Can you still hear me? Somebody?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Sometimes it switches the tabs audio. So let's get started. So today I'm going to be talking about the change of the Indigenous food system. I really like to just start with introducing myself and my language and who I am. So Oki, Nastu, Astansky, Nadanagu, Danielle Antelope, Nitsadapi Asita, Nitsadapi Amskapi Pikani. Hello, my name is Comes in Singing. I am called Danielle Antelope. I am from the Blackfeet Reservation at the foot of the Rockies, and I am Amskapi Pikani, which is misnamed Blackfeet. Almost all names of tribes are misnames just because of the language barrier that was there at the beginning. And today I am going to be presenting on behalf of Fast Blackfeet, where I am the executive director. Today's topic that we're going to focus on is the change of the Indigenous food system and the purpose of Fast Blackfeet. So we'll talk about timeline, and then we will jump into what we do at Fast Blackfeet based on the information that I share with you today. So I am an alumni of Blackfeet Community College. I graduated there with 2 associate's degrees, mostly so that I can learn math and science at the same time that I'm learning about my culture. The only school that I can learn Blackfeet language and about Blackfeet plants. And then as well, I didn't have to pay for those freshman and sophomore classes when I moved to MSU. I graduated in 2021 from MSU in Bozeman and obtained a bachelor's degree in sustainable food and bioenergy systems. Originally was going into nutrition work to try to be a dietitian, and then end up changing directions when I couldn't stop talking about the food system. So hopefully it gives you guys some insight through this presentation today. I really like to start with history, and I use my family as an example so that the people that I'm talking to can relate in their own families. And it's especially important in Native communities when I talk about my great grandma and my grandma, then it makes them think of who their grandma and their great grandma and the health that has shifted throughout these generations. So on the right, I introduce myself with my Indian name, which is Comes in Singing. I by no means sing, so that's not how you receive your Indian names. And my great grandma here on the right of the screen is Annie Mad Plume Wall, and she is my grandma who gave me my Indian name when I was a little girl. And this is a visual in my family of when culture changed in our generations. So my great grandma Annie, she was raised by her grandma because her mom died in childbirth. So she was raised by her grandma Minnie, and her grandma Minnie was born and raised during teepee days, born in a teepee, knew all the traditional foods and medicines and the customs and the traditions and the music and the songs and the dance, um, as well as the language. And so she raised my great grandma with a very deep sense of culture and identity. And then when my grandma was 13, she got taken to the boarding schools. And at that time, food was used as a warfare. So as land was decreasing, the warfare that was used was you wouldn't get rations if you didn't send your kids to boarding school. So as families started to starve, more and more families sent their kids to boarding school. And so in this picture, you'll see that my great grandma came back from boarding school. She was taken at the age of 13, and then she came back at the age of 17. So this is her at 17, coming back home. She has her hair cut. She is wearing different clothes. She don't have moccasins like her grandma. She has flats on, and she's wearing a dress. So it's a visual of identity being stripped. Um, and really an important reason why it's important to hold on to the culture that we do have in each of our individual families. Um, but I really like to show that this shift in health and the shift in the food system has only happened over the past 6 generations. And an indigenous perspective is always to think of generations behind you. So, and a lot of the actions that I do today is with the thought of my grandkids, which for some people is a really crazy way to think. But it's very natural and usual in our community. Um, this is my grandma Teresa Wall, still smoking. And her generation is the generation of getting new foods. So my grandma Annie's was boarding schools and getting land taken, and forced to speak English, and forced to lose their identity as an Indigenous person. And then into my grandma Teresa's generation, where hers was the reliance on these new foods that came to the reservations, and that's a lot of cheese, a lot of sodium foods, a lot of sugary foods. And so throughout my childhood, I spent a lot of time in the hospitals with my grandma, as she went through multiple amputations due to type 2 diabetes. She kept the love for plants, so very thankful that my grandma Annie um, had a passion and for protecting the plant knowledge. So even though she came out of there speaking English and she came out of there eating new foods, she did keep the importance of plant medicines. And so you'll see my grandma has a big old bundle of peppermint in her hands. And that's very normal for me growing up. When we'd go fishing or we'd go camp or out on a picnic, it was just part of our routine to go and look around the land to see what the land's providing at that time. Um, this is my mom, Ella Wall, in the other picture, and she's picking peppermint as well, something that we do every summer, multiple times throughout the summer. Um, we find it very a way of connecting with the land by finding what it provides for us at that time and also leaving an offering. And so it makes the land happy when the people are on the land enjoying in its abundance. And so it's something that each one of our generations has passed down is the love for plants and what plant medicine can do for you. And it's also a way that we're able to stay connected with those ancestors, with those grandmas before us. But a lot has changed in our health based on our foods. My mom is one of 9 children, and of those 9, 8 have diabetes, including my mom. And it really shows the prevalence in our community because my family story is not uncommon within tribal communities. Usually, when I share my story within my community or other tribal communities, it's very relatable. And so, we're going to talk about why it's so prevalent in tribal communities. This is my son, Jace. He is 8. He's sitting in the back of the room watching Ghostbusters. And then my daughter, Gabriella, who is almost 5 months. And these two beautiful faces are my hope. I know that if I can recognize food trauma and I can recognize generational traumas that are related to food, and food is related to everything, right? Food is related to our mental health. It's related to the way that we feel. It's related to the way that we connect with the land. And the better that we make that relationship, it benefits our next generations and those around us. So my son loves berry picking. He loves eating buffalo meat. His favorite vegetable is Brussels sprouts. Um, and it really makes me excited because when I was growing up, I'm one of 4 children raised by a single mom. So my mom was a single mom and she's a bus driver. And then there was 4 of us. And so we ate a lot of cheaper foods and foods that got us full fast, which then really reflected in our health. Um, and from recognizing that, I was able to change that for my kiddos. So like tonight's Tuesday, and every Tuesday is Jace cooks night, so he'll be cooking in the kitchen tonight. And just small changes that have really impacted my own family. And so I know that on this Zoom we have people from all over. Um, And so I like to share this map so that people recognize that wherever they come from or wherever they call home is the homelands of a tribe. Usually, it is rare to be on the traditional homelands that they have had for generations. And as Blackfeet people, we're very fortunate that we are on the homelands that we have always called home. But it's not always the case when you go visit other places, especially very urban cities. So knowing that there are still people today that consider that home, and just for reference, there's 574 federally recognized tribes, and hundreds that are unrecognized because of their population is a lot smaller. So as we look at that map, recognizing that indigenous foods are healthy, wholeful, nutritious, nutrient dense foods. And location determines food system, right? What we have going on now on the land is that we can grow corn, wheat, soy on across multiple states instead of just within our region. Sorry, one second. Oh, I thought my son was calling me, but no, it's a good part in the Ghostbusters movie, I guess. Um, so location determines food system. And if we as the human race grew foods based on region rather than based on demand, we'd have a beautiful variety of foods that are natural foods and healthy foods. So we had very sophisticated food systems across the nation. And when I refer to Turtle Island, I mean Canada, US, and Mexico. Those are all filled with traditional food systems. So on the East Coast, if you're from the East Coast, there that's where the Three Sisters originate. The corns, the beans, and the squash. Today, modern science can tell you why the corn, beans, and squash work so well together with the nitrogen fixation. But like it was a creation story and a story that stayed so strong within tribes that they continued to grow their food that way. And really, one of the farming methods that saved the first settlers that came to the U.S. When they were starving and couldn't grow their seeds that they brought over. The tribes over there taught them how to grow the corn, beans, and squash together, and have a very beautiful story that relates to why they grow it that way. Um, in the Midwest area, they have an abundance of wild rice with their beautiful lakes in their area, and they today are bringing back their harvesting practices of being very sustainable, right? They take canoes out and they put the rice over their canoe and lightly tap it and the rice falls off. It's very different than industrial agriculture, right? Industrial agriculture is all about, can we have a machine that makes this more efficient and effective? But is it sustainable? We're at a point in our food system where we care about high yield and not high sustainability. But being in the major that I was in at MSU, that is the talk right now, is how do we sustain our food system for the next generations to come? And it's really looking back on what was the sustainable practice on this land before industrial agriculture, before the Green Revolution. Um, so wild rice in this area, I order wild rice probably once a month from the tribes over in Minnesota, and maple syrup too. So it those foods are accessible um, today from people that are bringing back their practices and strengthening their practices within their tribal communities. And then on the West Coast, these tribes were considered the bountiful tribes. And because they shared the foods that they had, my sister lives up in Bellingham, Washington, and she is married to a Lummi Indian up there, and they do a lot of crabbing and a lot of fishing, and that's how they still practice their food system. But when you go up there, it's an abundance of all kinds of fish and all kinds of crab, and these tribes have the ocean on one side and the forest on the other side, which really allowed them to do a lot more hunting, gathering, rather than planting and gardening. And lots of stories within the Blackfeet culture of these tribes coming over and sharing food with us during famine. But the area that I know the most about is definitely the Blackfeet territory and in the Great Plains area. So our food system was very relatable to the North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and all the Great Plains area and up into Canada. And zooming in from today is Browning, Montana. So it's located right within this dark, large shaded area here. Um, and we have brother tribes on the other side. So before the border was an actual border, uh, and they were just establishing it, it was at the time that our tribes had to decide how to protect the most of our property or the most of our territory. So the lightly shaded area here is our traditional territory, and it was based on land markers, right? Like we didn't have fences, it was based on land markers. So the Yellowstone River being our south border, the Sweetgrass Hills being our east border, Saskatchewan River up here being our north border, and then the mountain range on this side being our west border. Um, and what you'll see out of the Blackfeet reservation here is that we are the headwaters of the nation. So the glaciers melt here. We have leased the Glacier National Park to Glacier National Park. We sign a lease every 100 years. And we fought to stay in this area right here because our sacred mountain is Chief Mountain right up here at the border. And then we wanted to protect the waters. It was very important to our people that we protect the waters because water is life. And without the right people protecting it, we could all, it would affect all of us. So these four waterways split into three different oceans and come off of the Divide Mountain. So if you look up Divide Mountain, you'll see that that mountain specifically, it's a perfect triangle mountain, and that's how we know when we're home. And that's where the water splits within that one mountain. And then our three brother bands are up here. And sometimes I get the question like, why did we split up within these four, but we've always been split up. So we'd rotate the land so that the land, like this is a large mass of land. So we were already split into bands and rotate around the territory, in case other tribes came into our territory, or if also for war, right? Like if we got if another tribe came to have war on our tribe, they could take all of us out at once. So we split up to not have such a condensed population together. And you'll see that with a lot of large tribes across the nation. And so this is a visual of land mass equaling food access, right? Um, the more land that we had, the more food access that we had. But when we got put onto reservations, um, the land mass was taken from us, and so our food source was taken from us. I'll tell you one thing: we would do not winter. We would not traditionally winter right next to the mountains. We'd be wintering on the west side and a little bit lower towards the Yellowstone River, so that we would have access to water, but also not such harsh winds and winters. We have the most awful winters here at the foot of the Rockies. And our food source was abundant. This land was covered with millions of buffalo across the land base, and they were the stewards of the land. There's a lot of research happening at MSU, University of North Dakota, at different universities by Native researchers, which is the coolest part about it, is that our Native people are out there doing the research to prove that our staff of life, the bison, is our what's healthiest for the land, and for a lot of reasons, right? So when a buffalo grazes, it cuts the grass right above, just like a lawnmower. It cuts it right above the surface, and then when a cow grazes, it rips up the roots from the soil. So then it negatively affects the soil health. And then same with their hooves. When a buffalo walks the land, its hooves dig in and pull up and aerates the soil, whereas a cow smushes the soil down and compacts it. So then it doesn't help aerate it. And then also there's a lot of research being done on their waste. So whose poop is healthiest for the land? Um, and all of those things really matter when we are keeping millions of acres of cattle every year. And then the research goes all the way into what meat is leaner, what meat has higher omega 3s, what provides more health for our bodies when we are eating these foods as well. So Blackfeet traditional diet is buffalo, wild game, and over 200 plants for food and medicine. And when you think of that, it's a very healthy and nutrient dense diet. And then it shifted, right? All within that generation of my great grandma Annie. At the same time that boarding schools were happening, the hold on, Jason. Hold on. Mom's on a meeting.
I just want to watch you.
Okay, okay. Okay, you can watch right there. Um, at the same time that our children were being taken and the land was being taken, the motto of the country was to save the man and kill the Indian, right? So kill the identity that we've had, the connection that we have to land, the ceremonies that we have. And this is how it was done. All of these buffalo that were killed for the US government was paid out. So some of the most wealthy families within the Great Plains area are heir to the hunters that killed off all the buffalo. And there was a very small amount of buffalo left, which for our buffalo in our area went up into Canada, and some of those tribes were able to protect and assign land mass to those buffalo. But this is what happened to our food source. And at the same, and it's very emotional for Native people to see this picture, because we're at the time of bringing the buffalo back. And then, like, we're celebrating that each year we have 10 more buffalo that were born into the herd, knowing that this is what happened to the ancestors of the buffalo that we are now um, have home on our homelands here on the Blackfeet Reservation. But um, it became cheaper to starve us as Native people than it was to continue to fight the tribes that they continued to try to force into assimilation. And so, as families began to starve, as tribes began to starve, chiefs and holy people made the decision within the tribe that that's okay. Made the decision on behalf of their tribe that they needed to um, comply for survival. And so a lot of tribes started to go on to their assigned reservation so that they can start getting rations, right? The US government said, you no longer have food, but if you go onto your reservation, then we will bring you food. And reservations in the beginning were fenced. So if you went over the other side of the fence, you were opting out of rations and you couldn't go back onto the reservation. And so Native people and tribal communities are very family connected, family orientated. So you if you take a piece of the family off the reservation, then they lose their piece of identity. Oh, I thought she was going to wake up. So these are the new foods that the government brought to the reservations. Mind you, all of this fresh stuff on the bottom was not part of it. But it was like our first time seeing canned foods and dried foods in this form. We dried berries, we dried roots, we dried meat, but we've never seen it processed in this form of cereals and flours and in corn syrups. Corn syrups are such a big part of the foods that were given to the Native people, and really where fry bread originated from, right? Sometimes when we think of Native people, we think of fry bread, and fry bread is a survival food. And I say survival food because at the beginning, we were getting the most awful foods. And there's like some of my great aunts and my grandmas still tell the story of when flour first came to the reservation. And it's a story that keeps getting passed down in my family. And it's for us to recognize what struggle had to have happened for us to be here today to make the choice to be healthy and to eat traditional foods again. And when they first got flour, the flour would move. And I remember asking my great aunts, "What do you mean it would move?" And they said there were so many bugs in the flour that the flour would just move. And so the Kipadakis, the older ladies, they would carry the flour up the hill and they would dump out all the flour, and they would use the sack that the flour came in to keep their dried berries and their dried roots and their dried meat. So they still found use in what was being brought to them, but not in the way that it was supposed to be. And so eventually, right, and it wasn't just flour, it's like the rotten vegetables, it was the rotten meat. And so then once we got onto reservations, a lot of our people became sick from the foods that we were eating that they were bringing us. And at the same time, it was illegal for us to leave the reservation to go hunt, to go gather. So then we were cornered into eating the foods that came, even if they made us sick. And eventually, putting together flour and oil, um, and some water and some sugar and some dried milk, right here, this dried milk, to make fry bread, and then dropping it in oil because was one of the big staples. At the same time that they would bring foods, they would bring alcohol. And so part of the rations was that you would get alcohol with the food that you come and pick up. And so that's really how they got families to be addicted to the foods and be addicted to the alcohol, and then comply, right? They wanted you to garden your yard and grow alfalfa and grow barley and grow wheat. And if you weren't growing when they came to do a checkup at your house, then you were off the ration list for the next month. And so it was really of survival, that we were learning how to survive in this new forming world where we were no longer able to practice who we are as Indigenous people. And this is what it led to, right? Throughout those generations of having great grandma being super healthy, and knowing plants, and then having my grandma just within that generation going and having type 2 diabetes and not having either of her legs, and then to my mom's generation to having 8 brothers and sisters, and then 90% have diabetes, and then now my generation. And so when you go into a tribal community, I hope that this presentation helps you be a little bit more open-minded, to why Native communities have such high rates of food-related diseases, right? It's not always been like that. It's within 4 generations that pandemic of food-related diseases has happened in our communities. And it's at the point where so many of our community has it that they think they're just set up to get it. And it's because not much has changed. We still have high concentrations of these foods in our communities, and we are purposely put on lands that are rural. So if you come and visit us in Blackfeet, go and visit the Crow down at the bottom of Montana, you'll notice that we purposely got put in the most rural areas that are not meant to grow food, right? We have like 2.5 months of warm, sunny weather here. That is not enough to grow food ourselves. So recognize the generational food trauma that has happened for our communities to be so sick right now, and also what makes us so susceptible to other diseases, like when COVID came. The Native communities had the most loss because we were already sick communities, and we're so heavily populated within our reservations. So what can we do about it? Sometimes when I do these presentations with Native people, by the time we get to this point, people are very emotional, or whether that's being sad or being angry. And when I learned all this information and start putting together all the puzzle pieces, I was inspired to do something about it. It was not um, being mad and feeling victimized. It was um, feeling empowered to bring those foods back and to be rebellious. I always tell people, be rebellious about it. Like, we were not meant to be here this long. We were not meant to be healthy. We were not meant to thrive on the lands that we were assigned. Be rebellious about it. And so that's what we do at Fast Blackfeet. We're a nonprofit organization. I joined Fast Blackfeet when they were still a community group, and they were finding the information about how much food insecurity was in the Blackfeet Nation. And so they were doing this huge community survey at the time. And they were just forming and transitioning from a community group into a nonprofit so that they can get funding for the programming that they would do based off of their survey. And so I joined this group and I became co chair of the board and served on the board for 4 years. And I was that crazy person that was like getting done with statistics class at MSU and then like running to jump on a board meeting. And I remember the other Native students in the American Indian Center would be like, "Are you crazy? Like you're just adding more work onto yourself." But what I was planning was like I'm setting myself up for where I'm going to contribute when I'm done with my degree, where I'm going to give my time and my energy. Um, and so at Fast Blackfeet, every program has relation to my family story that I just shared with you all. And so we'll talk about the programs as well. Our vision at Fast Blackfeet is a healthy, strong, and food secure Blackfeet nation. And so we're not done with our work until our vision is a reality. This is the survey that they were doing when I first came on to Fast Blackfeet. We did it in the summer and in the winter because we expected our winter data to be more drastic. Like we expected there to be a lot more food insecurity in the winter because we have a week of snow days in a row. We have snow so bad that we have to like dig people out of their houses to get them food and medicine. Where we're like using snowmobiles to get around in our communities. And it's just what we expected. But according to our data, that's not what happened. We are about the same food insecurity rate within summer and wintertime. And we found that in the Blackfeet Reservation, our food insecurity rate is 69%. That's 7 in 10 community members are hungry. And it doesn't mean that like your tummy's grumbling all day long and you don't have no food. It means that you could have burritos and frozen pizzas in your freezer, but you don't have access to healthy and culturally relevant foods. And so we were able to make a list based off of our survey on what can we do about it. What does our community need in order for our food insecurity rate to decrease? Um, and so we started. Oh, I'll tell you the programs next. But in this survey, we also asked the question of what are Blackfeet traditional foods, and then out of that information, we pulled the top 5 that were listed and put them in this graphic. And so this let us know by seeing fry bread on this top 5, it let us know that our community is where we need to be doing these talks, where we need to be talking about generational food trauma, where we need to be talking about uh, traditional foods and survival foods. And we've done a lot of work within our community in the past 5 years of presenting at the schools and doing all kinds of activities with our community to try to spread the information in a way that it's not like you should have known this, but it's like once we all know this, we can make big changes. So you'll see that the other foods on there are nutrient dense natural foods, but the fry bread is not. And so once you share that information with somebody, you'll see light bulbs turn on. And it's like, yeah, that didn't come from the land. So that can be a traditional food, but definitely a survival food, which has a story of its own. So this is the timeline that we used at Fast Blackfeet. When I was on the board, I would just share my family story, and it wasn't like that for um, people that are off the reservation. And so we had to make a timeline with a visual. So number one being my great grandma's generation, or her grandma who raised her, traditional food system, hunter and gather lifestyle, physical exercise for survival of going and harvesting, for processing hides, for everything that we did in our lives in a traditional lifestyle is movement of our bodies and natural preservation methods, right? It's like so brilliant to put dried meat and then a layer of dried peppermint and then a layer of dried meat and then a layer of dried peppermint and know today that peppermint is used in all kinds of herbicides and or all kinds of pesticides, so that because it keeps pests out of food, so we we're already using that in a preservation method. um Number 2 being my great grandma's generation, the grandma who gave me my Indian name. And so the loss of land, the loss of knowledge and food access, and the promise of these new foods. Number 3 is my grandma's generation of being hooked on these foods that are so high in sugar and salt and fat and are uh, it was like every family had the same foods. So flour, sugar, oil, syrup, beef, cheese, all those introductions of foods that we know are negative for our health. And then number 4 being my mom's generation of food insecurity. When my mom was growing up, she always shares her story of like, I'm the generation of frozen pizza. Like she talks about how cool it was, like that the grocery stores were getting frozen pizza when she was in middle school, and so then you were cool if you could buy frozen pizza and have that at home. And you were poor if you still had to have a garden in your backyard. And you were poor if you had to eat traditional foods, such as tripe and tongue and liver. And so my mom said she would be embarrassed at the end of the month when all of the rations and the commodity foods were gone, and then they had to eat traditional foods. And number five is my generation and Jace and Gabby of cultural reclamation, uh, bringing these foods back into our homes, teaching our kids about the land, being on the land with our community, empowering people by sharing information like this and being advocates for our community, and then creating sovereign and sustainable food systems. Um, we do that by teaching people how to gather. We do that by incentivizing hunting and donations to our food pantry. So I'm going to talk about our programs a little bit as well. The Oyo Food Pantry is our largest program. We serve about 300 families a week. And Oyo means we are eating together. So we decided on that name because we wanted it to be foods that our board and our staff would eat. We're not going to give out foods that make people feel bad or make people feel cornered. Um, and so we are need-based food pantry instead of an income-based food pantry because of the gap that is created by other income-based assistance programs for food, right? FDIPR is called the Food Distribution Program on Indian Reservations. It used to be the ration system until the government had to come up with a legal name for it. And in tribal communities, it's called commodities. We call it, that's what the common name is for it. SNAP, we know it's Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program. In our communities, it's called food stamps, and it creates a gap. So I was telling you that my mom is a single mom and bus driver, and she had 4 kids, and she missed the food stamps by $6. And so by her missing the food stamps, that $6 did not mean we were food secure. It actually put us in a position where my mom had to buy a lot of cheap food to make sure that we got full, right? It was a lot of chicken patties and a lot of pizza and warm up food. But that is exactly why I advocated so hard for a need-based food pantry. And I'm so glad that the board can listen and learn from lived experts, right? I lived and grew up in a food insecure household. And I think that's one thing that's so important is lived experts are becoming more recognized in decisions that are being made by organizations that serve that population, right? Don't assume that you know what's best for them, like ask them. And so we created our food pantry, and this is what a typical box in our pantry looks like. And we have right now we have a full cooler of ground buffalo meat right now. When we don't have buffalo meat that we're purchasing from local producers or other tribes, we host buffalo harvests in our community, and then we have a local processor process all of the buffalo meat, and then we put it in the food pantry. Um, and then we also include things like fresh produce and seeds and nuts and legumes and teas as well, because uh, when we're talking about food systems, it's also our beverages, right? What are we drinking? And traditionally, we drink bone broth and water and tea. And so trying to give people access to those types of drinks as well. Our nutrition education program stays very busy. Um, we do a food pharmacy prescription, so you can meet with our registered dietitian, who is also alumni Bobcat, Go Cats. She meets with community members who are referred by other clinics in the community, and then you get a $50 food pharmacy prescription to go to any of the grocery stores on the reservation and redeem your prescription. And we're very lucky that all the grocery stores were like super on board to participate in our program. Then they just bill us at the end of the month for however many food prescriptions came through, and then we just send them a check. And then we do cooking classes. So the stuffed bell peppers with wild rice is one of our popular recipes. And um, we do cooking classes with literally anybody who reaches out to us to host a cooking class. And then in the meantime, when we don't have requests for cooking classes, like for the schools or for the treatment center, then we do them. We do series of our own. So we'll do like family cooking classes, or we just got done doing soup and stories. So you come with your family and you make soup together, and then you listen to stories from elder. The little cups that you see here in the middle is food samples. So in the food pantry, we do cooking demonstrations, and then we leave samples and recipes out for the hardest ingredient in the pantry. So whether that's beets or whether that's lentils, um, or canned salmon, we challenge ourselves to make a recipe with the hardest ingredient and then leave a sample out. And so when our pantry participants come into the pantry, it smells like food, and then they're more likely to try the sample. And so we like to say it's a lot like Costco. And our community members are more likely to choose those foods when they have a recipe to go off of. And then we also do traditional food cooking classes. So this is dried meat grounded up and mixed with dried berries, and then use a healthy fat to bind them together. And it's an energy bar. So very also shows like that a lot of our foods were really paleo and keto based foods that were high in fat and good healthy fats and fiber. And so our nutrition education program stays so busy and really helps our community, right? When I was learning about new foods to cook, healthy foods for my family, I needed a cooking class or two. But instead, I had Pinterest. But when we created our programs, we were like, we need cooking classes first. Our third program and our last program is the Growing Health program. And this stemmed out of COVID when people became more health aware. Like after COVID, it was like, okay, the people we started to notice that the sick people were the ones that were passing and having the hardest time to recover. And so a lot of our community members were more interested in eating healthy and learning how to harvest teas and exercising. And so within the Growing Health program, we do tea and vegetable gardens in our community. This year we'll hit 40 gardens by the end of the summer that we have all around the reservation. And our community members get to learn about sustainable practices and how to give an offering and respectful ways of harvesting. And then also do our buffalo harvests out of this program that we and then we teach all parts of the animal, right? It's not just the butchering and getting the meat, it's how to scrape and tan the hide. It's how to make bone broth from the bones. It's how to make tasty meals out of organs. And you wouldn't expect, but like our community like races for who's going to take home the kidney and who's going to take home the liver. So it's still, those are still very traditional foods in our community. We couldn't do the work without the team. I'm telling you, I'm so blessed for the people who have contributed to Fast Blackfeet and giving their time and giving their energy to the mission that we have here at Fast Blackfeet. Everybody has resonated for different reasons for why they came to Fast Blackfeet, but a lot of the answers are the same, and it's that it's something that they needed while they were growing up, right? Just like me, my mom could have used a need-based food pantry. My family could have used cooking classes. We could have used a garden, and all of these things that contribute to us having a healthier community. These people in this picture believe in the mission, and they do their very best to make sure that we're able to accomplish our mission and our vision. So we wouldn't be able to do it without such an amazing team. And so, Gin Gadakdamatin, thank you so much. I'll stop sharing so that you can ask any questions within this next 10 minutes. Our website is fastblackfeet.org if you want to look us up. And you can find us at Fast Blackfeet on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Thank you so much, Danielle. That was incredible. We really appreciate all the information that you shared with us. Do any of the students on the call, do you guys have any questions for Danielle? Yeah, Emma, go ahead.
Hi, so I am a nursing student from MSU, and I'm actually going to be going to the Blackfoot Reservation in 2 weeks for Head Start screening through AHEC. So I was just wondering, like when I'm working with these kids, like as a white nursing student, like I don't want to like talk down to anyone or like what's the best way to speak to some of these kids about healthy like culturally appropriate diet choices?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I started very early with my son, so he's the only reference that I have for how to talk to kids about being healthy. But we really, when I talk to Jace and about healthy foods, it's what foods do you what foods come from the land, and then helps them relate to what are healthy foods. And one thing that you'll hear a lot is just people will talk about the foods that their parents eat. And that's really how I related it when I was younger, was that it was okay to eat these foods because mom and dad eat these foods. And so that's something that you might hear from the community, but I think it's really being open-minded and not, and it's also like when you talk about healthy foods, finding culturally relevant healthy foods, right? So if you're talking about broccoli, it's not as culturally relatable as if you're talking about squash, or if you're talking about potatoes or carrots. And really, in our area of the Great Plains area, is all root vegetables, right? Turnip, parsnip, carrots, celery, onions, and the stew vegetables. And so we like to talk about soups, and we have winter 90% of the year. So soups and uh, soup vegetables. And so I think if you make it more uh, focused on the foods that they have access to and that they're more likely to be eating in the community.
Well, hopefully, I don't know if I'm going to be meeting with you, but maybe I will meet you in when I come to out your way.
Yeah, and feel free to come visit us if we're not on your schedule while you're in
All
the
right,
area.
I'll talk to Teresa Schreiner about it.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else? I know
There was
I know I talk a lot and it's everything, but I didn't.
You did great. Yeah, thank you. There was a question in the chat from Elizabeth about who works the gardens. Is it volunteers? And do you harvest with a certain spiritual approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. The family owns and cares for the garden. So when we did a survey in our community a few years ago, we asked like, what is the barriers to gardening? Why don't you garden? And the number one reason was lack of knowledge. Like they don't have an ancestor who has been gardening that can teach them how to garden. It's number one was lack of knowledge. Number two was affordability. They can't afford to build a raised bed and put and buy starter plants, because in our community it's very hard. Okay, it's very hard to start from seed. So starter plants are how our gardens thrive with enough time. And so we set up the raised bed. We fill it with soil. We put starter plants in. Okay, honey, I'm sorry. I talk you too much. Yes. Um, Usually she's just right here, like on the meeting with me, but she got shots yesterday, so she's a little bit cranky. She's trying to wake up for it. Okay. Okay, honey. But throughout the season, we give classes on how to properly water your garden. We're not doing it in the middle of the day when it's the hottest time of the day, and then talking about why is that? It's not obvious to everybody. Oh, honey, look, we're on a meeting. Oh, so sorry. Oh, honey. And then for the spiritual part of it, yeah, here's a water. Oh, they lasted so long, didn't they?
They did great.
For the spiritual part of it is really giving offering and doing it in the right mindset, right? Like you don't want to go out there and be like, oh, I dreaded this all day, and then bring that energy into the garden. So we teach people like how to go out with your best intention. So some people will like, because if you're a morning person, then you're like waking up and taking your coffee out to your garden and watering and talking to them. We put the Blackfeet names next to each one of the plants, so you get to pick what tea plants you want and which vegetable plants you want, and then we put it into this little configuration thing that tells you which ones to companion crop the best together. So you get 2 raised beds, and then we set them up with the plants. And then throughout the entire growing season, we do classes and stuff with you, and we do garden visits. So then one of our staff come out to your garden, and then you can tell them like this has been happening, or the neighbor cat keeps coming into my garden, and then we just troubleshoot with you. And we try to keep the Blackfeet names next to them. So then you're practicing the Blackfeet name of the plant. And we teach people that the plants are relatives. So you're like more likely to like be more respectful to your relative, and knowing that like you're caring and giving your time and your energy to that plant. And then when it's fully grown and it's ready to be harvested, it's going to give to you in your health. That's kind of how we relate to our gardeners. And then a lot of at the end of the season, the gardeners get the opportunity to sell or donate their tea and produce back to the pantry. And we notice that our pantry participants gravitate, like we'll put a little sign that says grown by a community member in the program. And pantry participants will take all of the locally grown stuff first before other foods.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions for Danielle before we let her go? The only question I have, Danielle, is what is Jace making for dinner tonight?
Yeah, we mixed up our days. So we almost thought yesterday was Tuesday. That was just me. I'm a day ahead. So he made buffalo chili last night. And so he's just dying to get home to his leftovers he's been talking about since right after school. And so he'll probably make an apple crisp. And so we like to really practice chopping and cutting and stuff. So an apple crisp to go with his leftover buffalo chili.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. We really appreciate your time this evening, and we will let you get back to your children. And for all of the students on, per usual, if you're from Montana, we'll log your hours for you. If you're from out of state, we will let your AHEC Scholars Coordinator know that you attended and tell them how long you were here. So thank you all so much for your time and attention this evening. And Danielle, there's a lot of positive comments in the chat too, if you have a time to check them out before you leave.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. It was great to share space with you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Danielle.